Hello, everybody. My name is Doug, and I'm joined by Emily today.
Hello.
We are Talky Taffy, and we take a bite out of some random topic, and we chew on that, nibble it, savor it a little bit, and then we just talk about it. I guess is actually that's all we actually do. But anyway, Emily, how are your driving skills since COVID? It's been over a year now.
Funny you should ask me that because I actually recently got into a car accident.
Did you? Oh, hold on.
Yeah,
we need to unwrap this before we get started.
Okay, well,
I mean,
it wasn't like anybody's fault. It was weather conditions' fault. Because it was like super icy. I was actually driving from Minnesota to Utah, to like come back home, and as I was driving through South Dakota, I hit an icy patch while I was on like the highway, and my car ended up like flipping over.
Jesus, my God.
So it was actually a pretty decent car accident, but luckily no one else was involved. I didn't even get whiplash. Like, I was super unharmed. My car was totaled, but like I was totally fine. And like I said, it wasn't really any fault of my own. It was just like I was driving in a straight line going 40 miles an hour. Like, I wasn't even doing anything, and I hit this patch, and so my car just
Yikes.
went. But yeah, so
but you were wearing a seatbelt.
Yes, I was wearing a seatbelt.
Smart.
And if I hadn't, then I would have been probably much more hurt. But like I said, not even a single scratch on me. Like, the only pain that I ended up getting from the car accident was getting all my stuff out of my car and then cutting myself on some glass, and that was about it. So,
well,
but besides that, in terms of my driving skills, I think I'm a decent driver.
Yeah.
Just having prefaced that statement with how I just had a car accident. But I think I'm a decent driver. I used to be really bad. Like, I used to be a pretty aggressive driver. But then, like, something clicked in my brain, and I was like, I don't have to drive fast. So now I don't.
I mean, honestly, I had a pretty similar moment when I got 2 speeding tickets in a month. That'll deter you real quick from being Formula One driver on the highway. The second one I'm pretty upset about because I had changed behavior after the first one. The second one was just me blowing off steam, and there just happened to be a police officer sitting at the other end of the bridge. I don't want to get into it, but yeah. I think most people have that moment at some point, and to me it's unfortunate because you have this sense of safety around driving when you first get your permit, and then that kind of fades away at some point. You start feeling...
Actually, the first time I got my permit, literally the first day I got my permit, I got into a fender bender.
Emily, you're not a good driver.
I mean,
it happens. It happens. I've been in 3 fender benders. You're fine.
And it was in a parking lot, and it was with like a sign that was in the parking lot. So it wasn't with any other cars. I was just learning how to drive. I mixed up the brake and the gas.
Totally normal thing to do.
Never did it ever again.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm an average driver now. I used to think I was a good driver, but now I'm an average driver.
No, you can be a good driver if you believe in yourself enough. So actually, that does remind me a little bit of when I got my permit. I got it in like, I did summer driver's ed through the district, and then after like 2 weeks of driving, we went on a vacation out to Montana, and we took the train out there. My mom drove and everything, but when we came back, I was driving us home from the train station back to our house, and so this was 2 weeks on. 2 weeks I had my permit, and then a full week out in Montana where I was not driving. And then coming back to it, I was very like out of practice. I was kind of shaky on it, which is why I wanted to drive, to keep working on that skill,
Yeah.
But there's this one part on Interstate 94 in the middle of St. Paul where you have to, it's a very sharp turn that, basically is right at highway speeds. And I was in the left lane trying to merge the center lane, and there was another guy in the right lane behind me trying to move into the center lane. And I was so busy looking back at him that I almost lost track of where I was steering my car. And so it just, it got swervy and weird, and he ended up throwing me a middle finger. And, he was definitely in the wrong on the merge part. I was just a bad driver on top of that, but he's definitely at fault, not me. Nothing happened, though. We were fine.
That's good. Close calls like that always kind of get your heart pumping.
Oh, it's crazy. I've had other close calls like that. Like the first day I got what's still my current car, I was, as you do, you mess around with the electronics as you're driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour. And I hit a patch of ice or snow, or I overcorrected or something because I was drifting a little bit, and it started swerving. But then the safety features of the car with differential braking and stuff saved itself. I was like, nice. And then it just kept on driving. But yeah,
I would love to have had that.
That was spooky. There was one time I was driving up north to Minnesota, car in front of me clobbered a deer. And that's the hardest I've ever hit the brakes.
Wow.
And then a guy spun out directly in front of me, which is actually very similar to what you were describing. We were doing 40, maybe 30 miles an hour down this road, very straight, even, just suddenly a patch of ice, and he just spun out and went into the ditch. I was fine because I know how to drive on the snow, but anyway. So I've been away in Colorado/Utah, that's right, your state, for the last 6 months.
Oh, yeah.
Nope, not for the last 6 months.
I was going to say 6 months.
I've not been there for 6 months. I've been there for 5 days. I just got home 40 minutes ago. And while I was out there in that 5 days, I drove more in that time than I had in the 6 months prior. I have not been driving a lot during COVID. And my grocery store is spitting distance from my home. So it's not that's racking up my time. I've gone to work a couple times, and that's a 10-minute drive. But anyway, I've come into familiarity with my driving skills. Just earlier this morning, we were driving through the Rocky Mountains toward Denver, and there's a long stretch where you're on the downhill coming off of the Front Range, and it was a constant state of there's not ice on the road right now, but there could be in a second. And you're constantly just looking at the road, looking for that next patch of ice to hit you, and trying to be ready, figure out where your exit strategy is and everything. But it was freaky. It was weird. So to lighten up the mood a little bit, 36,096 deaths in 2019 resulted as a result of car accidents. So that's actually the third leading cause of deaths in America is accidents. So that'll get you. So driving is pretty important here. And one of the biggest factors that makes driving unsafe is distracted driving. So I want to talk about that a little bit. From a 2021 survey, and I'm sorry, I haven't been doing any of this stuff. Sorry, we haven't been putting references in chat.
Oh.
I got it.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, there's your references for all this stuff. 52% of drivers admitted to eating while driving in a survey conducted earlier this year. 23% of those respondents admitted to texting while driving. What I found interesting is that 40% of iPhone users admit to engaging with their phone on occasion, whereas that number is 55% for Android users. So iPhone master race. I think we are seeing an increasing number of these distracted driving accidents occur throughout the last couple decades as texting and just the connection that people have with their mobile device has changed over the last decade especially. And I mean, it's been a while since I've been through driver's ed, but I imagine that's probably the hottest topic that they talk about in there is, using your phone while driving, that kind of thing.
I was actually out with my dad today. We had to go pick up some tile because he's renovating the bathroom. And on the way home, I looked over in the car next to us, and it was this young girl, and she was on her phone. The light turned green. She looked up, saw that it was green, and accelerated while looking down at her phone. It was the wildest thing I've ever seen, and like I was watching her, and the entire time she like looked up maybe once every like 10 seconds, and I was just like, why? How is she not in a car accident yet? And I just found myself getting so angry because it's just I have such strong opinions about people using their phones while driving because it's pretty selfish, if you ask me, because you are choosing to not only endanger yourself but like other people on the road. But yeah, when I saw that, I was like, I cannot believe that people actually still do this, knowing how like stupid it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think it's a slow warming of the water, right? Because like, so I'll admit it, I text at red lights. I text. I was stuck behind a train earlier today. I was texting during that. And like there are times where nothing's going on. You can text. I'll honk at your little booty if you're sitting at a light not going because you're too busy. If you're sitting at a green light not moving because you're too busy reading your phone, I'll honk at you. That's fine. But I mean, it is very selfish when you get in these situations where you're in the proximity of pedestrians, especially, is the thing that gets me. So like if you're driving through a neighborhood, if you're in a parking ramp, I mean, that's a reference from today. I saw a dude just totally on his phone in the parking ramp as I was walking to my apartment earlier today. And like, it's so infuriating to see that. And like you say, I don't understand why it's still a thing. That doesn't make sense to me.
Like, in my mind, I could either choose to like, okay, if I got in a car accident, whatever. But if I ended up hitting someone and like, God forbid, kill them, I would never be able to forgive myself. Answering a text message is not worth the guilt of having killed someone.
No.
So like, that's how I justify it in my brain. Just don't.
Yeah.
Unless you're okay with like killing someone, in which case you should get that checked out anyway.
Agreed.
Like, yeah.
But that's always the thing you hear about these
feelings.
Interviews with people that have done this, where they have killed someone because they were reading their phone, is that immense amount of guilt that they have about it. And it's like, if you had that guilt after the fact, why didn't you have that guilt before the fact? Or realize that that's a possibility? And that's the part that gets me. It drives me insane. Actually, so Jenny, good point about Apple CarPlay. I used it myself for the first time during this trip. Like my mom's car has it, and she's used it a little bit, but I haven't used it myself until just this past weekend. And it was pretty nifty because I feel like I can stay on top of everything. Like I've been going back and forth with my doctor's office this weekend, the last couple of days especially. And so it's been really helpful that I can just like navigate to the phone call, to the missed call that I have, and just call them back right away. Instead of needing to dig around my phone to find the number and punch that in and go through the menu options to get to the place I need to be, that kind of thing. So CarPlay was very nice because it felt like I could do some things, not everything of course, but like even Google Maps, like it's designed to work natively with the car, and so all that I had to worry about is a little scroll wheel and a push button. It felt like I had an old school iPod again, honestly, but like it works. Like it's a simple system, but it works. So yeah, I think distracted driving is probably the biggest threat that we face to like driving safety in the immediate future. One thing that's been an ongoing threat is driving under the influence. And so I don't know if you're pretty aware of your different like BAC levels and how you feel at those different points. But like, I've been at a .08 before. I should not be driving at a .08. At a .07 should not be driving. In fact, I'd say my tipping point was about a .04, which is, I mean, state laws almost everywhere is a .08. And for commercial drivers, it's a .04. Same for commercial pilots, actually. You can be at a .04 legally. But to me, even like a .04, like, and I think I'm a little bit of a lightweight in that regard, but even that's impaired driving. And states also have laws that address that if it takes you out of normal use of mental or physical faculties, then that's considered impaired driving. And so like, you can still get a ticket if you're at a .07. You can get a DUI, which depending on the state, it's at least a misdemeanor usually. So, but 67% of fatal crashes in 2018 involved at least one driver with a BAC above 0.15. So almost double the legal limit. Those heavily intoxicated drivers were responsible for 2/3 of those fatal accidents in 2018.
Wow.
So yes, while driving at a .08 is dangerous, don't do that. Driving at double the limit is so much more likely to get you in trouble because you don't see people driving that intoxicated very often, and yet they still lead that demographic the way that they do. And it's disgusting to me, honestly, that anyone could fathom the idea of getting in a car at a .15. Sorry if I attacked you personally. So Colorado, which is where I've been spending a lot of the last few days, they also enforce similar restrictions as it pertains to marijuana. And really the law here is the same. It's just, any alcohol or drug that affects your mental or physical abilities to operate a vehicle. So it's important to keep in mind that, illegal drugs also play a part in impaired driving. It's less talked about. Obviously, alcohol is a more prevalent part of that cause of those accidents, especially those heavily intoxicated people.
That reminds me of a story that I heard a while ago, but I remember someone ended up getting a DUI for having too much Red Bull. They had so much Red Bull that the caffeine was impairing their ability to drive, and they drove like a drunk person. So they ended up getting a DUI for drinking some absurd number of Red Bull. Like, I want to say 5 to 8 cans of Red Bull, something like that. But yeah, so I'm not surprised that any other drug would impair your driving or get you a DUI.
And that's the thing with like these kind of, we're getting very legal here, not legal advice, but like with these kind of laws is that they're designed in such a way that they're flexible with interpretation. So if you're impaired by any measurement that's available, then you are not driving legally, and that's the correct approach to that. Because you could say, oh well, I'm not drunk. Well, you're under the influence of something still, and that's the whole point of a DUI, and that's I think why we've seen the language change from DWI to DUI more. You go from intoxicated to impaired, I think is a more appropriate word for it. But for whatever it's worth, we are seeing some improvements. So between 1982 and 2018, we did see drunk driving fatalities decrease by 53%, and that number is 83% for drivers under 21. Now, I don't know if back in 1982 if the legal drinking age was 21 yet. I think it was a couple decades before that it changed. So I think it was definitely 21 at that point. But obviously that was not reality a lot of the time. But I think states have adopted a very harsh zero tolerance policy on people under the age of 21 drinking while driving. You blow a .01 and you're going to prison. Which has been, I think it's been effective as the numbers prove here, as we see an 83% reduction in underage drivers being involved in fatal accidents. Now, personally, my preference would be take away the human altogether, let the car drive. And I think that's where we're headed. So I do want to see, and sorry, Emily, I'm jumping all around this script. But so like fully autonomous vehicles, I do see as the future of driving. The biggest hazard that we see with the way that they work today is that they're not able to adapt as well to these dynamic situations and, believe it or not, stationary objects. It's very hard for a car to tell, hey, is that stationary object a plastic bag or is it a pickup truck? And we've seen examples where, like Tesla in particular, where these cars will just speed into the broadside of an 18-wheeler just because they don't detect it. It's stationary. It doesn't know what it is. Could be a sensor malfunction. Could be something else going on. And they just don't know how to handle it. So, you kind of need to bring the different senses together to build a full story here. And this is somewhere where humans aren't perfect either. I mean, when it comes to driving, we just rely on sight, on vision. And there are times where we're not able to see the road. We're not able to see where we're driving. They always talk about like overdriving your vision, where you should be able to stop in the distance that you can see. And so like in foggy conditions, nighttime, if you're going over the top of a hill or something like that, like these are all cases where you could see problems with human drivers too. And so, so with autonomous vehicles, another concern there is security. You could see these things hacked, and like if you hacked every Tesla in the country at the same time with some sort of malicious bug, I mean, think of how many people's lives that could be. I guess to put that into better perspective, if you hacked every Nissan in the country today, how many people would that be? If you meant harm,
Definitely.
And then the other thing comes down to like ethical decision making, and this is one of the things you see pretty often come up. So there's like the trolley problem, where hey, you're going down the rail at one person or at two people. Do you flip the switch and kill one person? That kind of thing. So like these kind of questions, are cars able to evaluate them in a fair and ethical way? And to me, the answer is let's ask a bunch of humans the same questions and see how they answer, and use that to model how our technology will answer it. But I mean, we'll see. Maybe a more short-term solution to bad drivers is recurrent training, which, boy, does this sound fun. I bet it's going to be not a contentious subject. But I do want to talk about how this works for pilots as kind of an analogy for this. And so, like, technically speaking, the Federal Aviation Administrator, the guy that sits at the top of the FAA, approves all pilot certificates and currency and all that kind of stuff. Though a lot of this is, of course, done through delegation. So the administrator delegates it to a whole bunch of regional administrators. They delegate it to their check airmen. They delegate it to other larger groups of check airmen. They delegate it to instructors. Instructors check the pilots. So it's this big tree of checking. And I think we would see something pretty similar come out of that if we were to apply this to cars, where you'd have National Highway Transport Safety Administration is there monitoring this whole system, and they have inspectors who go around and check out these driving schools, and the driving schools are the ones checking the student drivers and that kind of thing. I mean, we have driving schools today. Obviously this would result in much larger of those systems. I think for the most part, though, driving licenses are managed by the state, right? Those tests are administered by state officials.
Yeah.
And so I think just to match the scale of what you would need, you'd probably need a private organization running it. I mean, it's not to say this would balloon it 1,000-fold. It wouldn't. It would be I mean, so like with pilots, it's every 2 years, which I think is pretty reasonable for drivers too. I mean, honestly, it could even be less than that. I think if you had that every 2 years, that would keep people in better shape of like following the laws and like signaling turns and stuff. Like signaling turns is my biggest pet peeve with driving, and lane changes.
Also, people staying in the left lane when they're going like when they're not changing lanes or trying to pass somebody.
Yeah.
It's a big problem where I live right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I was in your freaking state this week, and they don't like doing that. Colorado's like,
here in general are pretty bad.
Colorado's the other end of the spectrum though. Like people will instantly get back into the right lane. It's like, dude, no one's behind you. Like you don't have to rush back into the right lane, 10 feet in front of me. Like you got time. Actually, so I think Jenny raised a good point too, which is like old people, as they age out. Right now, we usually look for vision. Is basically the only test that most states do. I don't know if that's true of Utah, but it is for Minnesota. It is for Texas. The only thing that we keep up on is making sure you can see the road. That's probably the biggest concern with someone aging in particular. But it's not the only thing that can make someone unable to drive. There's reaction time. There's ability to physically handle the car. There's just mental states that deteriorate over time that make driving so much less safe. And I think that's somewhere where this, the repetition could keep things going and fresh so that they don't just, rot away in your brain. And I think too, just keeping those unsafe people off the road is the more important thing to me, because I do think there are people who should not be allowed to drive the way that they do right now. I'm fine with them if they're willing to make behavioral changes and, change the way that they drive. Another thing that we do in aviation is like, if you get in an accident, you have to, in some cases, you have to go do an examination with an FAA check airman again. And so this is kind of, it's an abbreviated portion, usually just focused on whatever caused the accident, of where they evaluate your skills on that kind of thing.
How often does that happen with pilots?
I've had one, but not often. It's just me. But I mean, they happen. They definitely happen. I don't have statistics. I can't tell you. I'm sorry. But it is something that comes up every once in a while, and I mean, it's not a deal breaker. Put it that way. So if you wanted to be a career pilot, having one of those would not be a deal breaker. So it's not that uncommon.
Okay.
But yeah, and to be clear too, mine was an incident, not an accident. Terminology.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, so I mean, I think there is a lot that we could do in terms of recurrent testing with driving, and to me, it just boggles my mind that that's not a thing. Even if it were 5 hours in a classroom or something like that, just to be fresh on the rules so you at least know them. I think there's people who just don't know the rules because they coasted through driver's ed and barely, passed their permit test with a 70%, and I don't know. It concerns me how loosey-goosey we are on letting people drive. And I understand it's an important privilege. A lot of people need to be able to drive to be able to get a job, and get food and be able to see their family. So I understand it's an important thing to have, but I do also wish that it was safer, because driving is one of the, I think it's the most dangerous thing we do.
Yeah.
Of all the activities we have in our lives, driving is the most dangerous thing. So I just wish that were maybe less the case. Unfortunately, it's kind of trending the wrong direction right now with driver assistance programs. So there's these modules in a car that will adaptive cruise control, which is my favorite thing. Lets you set whatever top speed you want, and then once you get close to the car in front of you, it'll slow you down so you keep your distance from them. But mix that with lane keeping. Oh wow, that URL didn't work. So if you mix that with lane keeping, where the car will automatically adjust its position in the lane, it gets dangerous because people stop paying attention to where they're going at that point. And this is a trend we see in aviation as well, but that's something else. But you see this reliance on the automation to do everything for you. And what we see is that people that use specifically those two systems, adaptive cruise control and lane keeping, when they use those, they speed 96% of the time. And they're 10% more likely to be involved in a fatal car accident when they're using these partial driver assistance technologies, because they're not perfect and they're not authorized, by the Department of Transportation. Like, these things are not approved to be road legal, that you can just sit back and relax while the car is driving itself. And so you do still need to be vigilant as a driver with these assistance technologies. Now, I agree, this hump where you go from needing to be attentive because you're the only thing driving the car to a point of you can relax a lot because there's so little that you need to manually do. But you're not quite at the point of fully automated where it's safe. So we're kind of going through this transition right now where it's a little bit more dangerous, that people are just getting complacent with this. And the whole thing with pilots is like, oh, no pilot knows how to fly anymore, which is not true, but point taken. The other thing you see with adaptive cruise control systems, and this happened to me a lot on my recent trip here, is that they'll start braking randomly out of the middle of nowhere. So like, you'll be driving, there'll be someone in the lane next to you, and they're like getting onto the off ramp or whatever, and then it just like slams on the brakes, and it's very disorienting. So I had to disengage my adaptive cruise control probably a dozen times over the last 5 days, just where it started doing something weird. And so like that's why you have to just kind of keep in touch with it. Now, one thing that I do find encouraging is the Tesla full self-driving. Now, this is only highway statistics, so highway driving obviously a lot simpler than like city driving. But in that highway driving, the full self-driving automation on Teslas is 8 to 9 times safer in terms of likelihood to get into an accident as opposed to a human driver. And like almost tenfold safer, which is amazing to think about. And I don't know what the leading causes of these highway accidents are. I don't know if it's like side swipes because people aren't able to maintain their lane, or if it's overcorrections when they haven't been paying attention for a while because they've been texting or whatever, and they see something happening on the highway in front of them and they try to overcorrect and roll off the side of the road or whatever. I really don't know. And another thing to point out too is that there is a little bit of sampling bias here. People are less likely to use that full self-driving when they're on an icy road or when it's raining. So for the most part, that's being driven only in clear, good conditions. So there's some bias there too. But that being said, like still 8 to 9 times safer is a pretty substantial margin there. And Elon Musk has said in the past that he wants it to be 10 times safer as an entire product, which we don't quite have full self-driving as an entire product yet, but like it's getting there. Anyway, to make one more correlation to aviation here, because that's my thing. I like planes. We see autopilot in an aircraft being engaged, basically from the point that the plane takes off until shortly before landing. The plane is flying itself. The pilots are telling it what to do, but the plane is doing it all itself. In a lot of ways, it's a lot simpler because the air is less congested, because there's 3 dimensions to it and a lot more space and a lot fewer planes in the air than there are cars on the road at any given time. And so you don't often get into a situation where you need to like make sure you're staying in your lane so you don't bump the plane next to you. You know, that's not a thing that happens. But I mean, there are some added complexities to aviation autopilot in terms of managing like altitude and stuff in addition, you know, in accordance with what procedure you're supposed to fly into the airport so you're not getting another traffic sway or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you've got these planes aren't relying on visual cues for what they're doing. It's all navigation based, so in most cases GPS. And so it's very simple for them to just go from point A to B. There's not a curving road in between. There's not a blind intersection. There's not, a patch of ice there. It's just simple for a plane. So it's a little bit of a difficult comparison there. But my whole project in school was about fully autonomous aircraft from gate to gate, which, maybe it happens someday, maybe it doesn't.
Maybe.
But anyway, to kind of rehash a little bit, I do think that recurrent training on driving is what we need right now to make our roads safer. And I think in the future we will see fully autonomous vehicles, whether you like it or not. That's just the way it's going. I like the idea of no one owning a car, and they're just these companies that send cars out to take you wherever you need to go. Kind of like Lyft is today, but no one's driving it. But anyway, we'll see how that goes.
This reminds me a lot of, it's such an old movie, but it's a Will Smith movie. It's called I, Robot.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah.
And there's that scene where like he gets into a car and he's driving the car, and the girl that's with him is like, "Are you crazy? You're driving the car right now. You're going like how many miles per hour?" And all the other cars around him are being automated. He's just like, "I don't trust the robots to make the decisions for me." And like the whole, that kind of also reminded me of like the ethical decision making, because the whole premise of the film was that a robot had come to rescue him and his daughter, I think in a car accident or something like that. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the robot could only rescue one of them. And the robot decided to save Will Smith rather than his daughter because he had a higher chance of survival than if the robot had saved the girl. And so like all of that kind of like touched up on the muddiness that can come with, fully automated systems and things that aren't necessarily human run because of things like ethics and values. And at what point do you say that a robot can't make the same decisions that a human can? And at what point do we say that robots are safer than humans? So that this whole conversation has just been like sending me back to a very distant and fuzzy memory of that film. But yeah, it was a decent movie, so I'd recommend watching it if you're feeling Will Smith.
Yeah, so if you guys have never heard about Will Smith, go check him out. He's a great streamer. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I do wonder what this stuff will look like. And especially on the ethics side of things, I find particularly interesting. That example you gave is a super interesting analysis of like, you can only save one, who do you choose? And you have to justify that somehow. And I think that's where meticulous planned decisions now can save the people in the moment when that happens. And so that's why you need people working on these hypotheticals and making these decisions now. And I mean, that's something we can do now. We could set that up and start doing it now. And I don't know if there has been any large project that's taken this on. I know there've been a couple small things, but it would be really great to see like a single large scale project on this starting to gather information about what humans consider ethical as it pertains to things like, car accidents or whatever, and making those tough decisions now. And obviously it would not just be a single person getting paid $12 an hour eating a bag of Cheetos deciding that, but like a group of people who justify it for whatever reason and that kind of thing. And so I get really interested in the ethics of that. And that's going to be weird when those decisions start being made by robots.
Yeah, and also like you run into the issue that like different groups of people have different ethics. Mm-hmm. So like it would be interesting to see if something like that is even possible, to have a collective ethical viewpoint or a collective set of values. Because, I mean, we can see it everywhere now, just living life, that this is where a lot of contention arises from, is differences in ethics and values.
Yeah.
So it would be interesting to see if something like that is even possible in the future. But yeah, gotta keep an eye out for it. But the pessimist in me says it's not possible. But you know.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, this is the project that I did in school. It's my senior project, fully autonomous aircraft, and I think it's possible eventually. People just need to put in the legwork and get it done, and it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be better than what we've got today. And I would even say it needs to be significantly better than what we've got today. Which, when it comes to cars, pretty low bar, honestly, because a lot of people die from road accidents. Like, it wouldn't be hard to get better than that. And then, yeah, you can get into the whole like transition phase. What's that going to look like, and how do you do that correctly? And that's a thing too, because like, does an autonomous car drive like a grandma and piss you off, and you want to go around it or whatever? And is that more dangerous? Could be. Yeah, it's weird. It's gonna be wild seeing what happens over the next decade here with driving. But in the meantime, let's get some recurrent training, please.
Definitely, that I can agree with.
All right, so if driving safety is not your champion cause, we can encourage you to get involved with the National Asian and Pacific American Women's Forum. Nailed it.
Nice.
They're our current charity that we are supporting, and they help make contributions toward Asian and Pacific Islander women. It's related to like education and employment, right, Emily? Am I getting that right?
And also providing health resources.
Health. Awesome.
As well. Mm-hmm.
So go check that out. Words. And our last episode, episode 6, is the one that we talked about it. So you can find out more there, and why this is the cause that we chose. You can email us. We're talkytaffy@gmail.com. We also put things in Discord, and we'll put out schedule updates on Discord is our primary channel for that. So if you're able to join that. The link is in chat if you're on Twitch. It's in the description if you are not. And do you know what our next episode's going to be?
Yeah, it's gonna be on procrastination and what ways we can deal with or get around it.
Not
because
me
that's
finishing.
Something I definitely need help with.
Not me finishing this script about 3 minutes before we went live and still moving things around during the conversation. Yeah, boy, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Have you started working on that yet?
Ironically, no.
Okay. Awesome.
But it will be ready. It will be ready.
All right. If you're not watching us live, we do stream this podcast live on Twitch every other Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. That is 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're in another country, I'm sorry. Our social media links are in Twitch. They're in the description. So go out and love each other. Yeah, we got you. We're with you. We're going to make the world a better place eventually. I don't know. Anyway, bye.
All right. Thanks for coming, guys.